Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another exciting episode of the Jaded Mechanic Podcast. One of those new friends with me is with me tonight, Mr. Eric Pierce from TikTok, otherwise known as Drac. How are you tonight, man?
Doing pretty good. How about yourself?
Very good, very good. We were just talking for the people that are going to see this on YouTube, if they could get the full audio. He's got a video. He's got a beautiful dog behind him with a cone around her head, which makes her look very sad. But if you hear me,
She is sad when she wears it.
yeah. So if you hear me laughing at once in a while, it's not. I'm laughing at the guest. I'm laughing at the guest dog. So
Yeah.
Eric, tell me a little bit about yourself. You're big on TikTok. I kind of knew you because you were working at a Nissan dealer and you were doing some Nissan repairs, which is in my back category, my history a little bit. And then you kind of disappeared for a while. And, you kind of came back around. Kind of get us kind of going on what you've been up to, where you've been, where you want to go.
Well, I'd say the TikTok algorithm definitely put me in that, like, going away, because I never stopped making videos or things like that. I've noticed if I don't start a video saying like customer states, XYZ, this car is doing this thing, the algorithm doesn't push my videos at all. And yeah, a bunch of people, when they finally do see videos, like if it gets more than 500 to 1,000 views, people say, "Oh, where have you been? Like, I haven't seen your videos, and I didn't even know that you were no longer working at Nissan." And then I comment telling them kind of what's happening, but mostly the main cause of me leaving Nissan is that I got in a motorcycle accident May 8th of 2023.
Yeah.
Broke my thumb, my wrist on my left hand, and then I hurt my back pretty good. And finally leaving, it's just was a compiling of everything. Like, as well as everyone else watching this, well, if they've been in the mechanic field, know that when you bend over all day long, you kind of have a sore back at the end of the day. You stretch, you do whatever you need to do, and then you wake up in the next morning and you feel fine, ready to do it again. Now, for 9 years, that's how it was. I mean, some days you wouldn't even have any back issues if you had an easy day or whatever. But after the accident, the management would try to give me the easier jobs, like reprograms, this, that, and the other, to start me off with. And that was really difficult to make any money just doing those jobs. So I did as best as I could. I begged my manager to give me an apprentice because I can teach people just fine and they can do the work for me. But upper management didn't really want to do that, it didn't seem. He finally was able to get the go ahead to have one of the B techs with me for 1 day a week. And when I finally had him with me, I could make 10, 15 hours in a day like I used to. And then as I healed, got a little bit better, I could be on my own again. But after the accident, I've only ever done one transmission replacement.
Yeah.
And that was kind of difficult to do. So I still had issues with doing those because I used to, like, a Pathfinder pays 15.5 or something like that for a transmission replacement.
Paying good.
And if I start at 7 o'clock in the morning, I can have the transmission out and bolt the bell housing back in before lunch, and then have the job done at maybe 2 o'clock.
Yeah.
So I could get the job done really quick because I've had very repetitious work, especially at Nissan doing all those transmissions.
So let me back up here for a little bit, or not get too far of ourselves. You said 9 years. So did you have 9 whole years at Nissan? Or is that
I started July 3rd of 2015 and I left in 2023.
Wow. And was that your first, like, what did you have a kick at the industry before getting into Nissan, or did you kind of?
I started working at Nissan not even knowing how to change oil in a car.
Wow.
Well, I should say I had a 1993 Ram that I changed the oil on it once.
Right
and that's the only real experience that I've done. And then my friend helped me replace the thermostat, and I started as a lube tech. So um, one of my friends was neighbors with the general manager at that store. And so he's the one who's like, hey, we're hiring. If you don't want to work at Burger King anymore, put in your resume. And I got the job pretty easily.
Mm-hmm. Wow, man. So 9 years, you became pretty. You like that's your whole kind of start to where you are now is all on that brand, right? So
Yep.
you'd say you're pretty comfortable with it. Whereas me, like I jumped around on so many things before I finally hit Nissan late in my career that by then I never loved that brand at all. Like I didn't.
Yeah.
I mean, there was the transmissions, yeah, were good work, but they were so like everything else about them was really hard to sell the customer on doing
Mm-hmm.
maintenance on it because they always seemed to be coming in for a transmission issue. And you know how
Yeah.
that goes, right? When the internet says that you drive a Nissan, you're going to put a tranny in it, then everything becomes a transmission, right? It's not a misfire, it's not a plugged cat, it's not a low fuel.
Yeah.
It's always a transmission. They always want a tranny. Um, so that did you find when you started, like how was it to work your way up? Like did you get treated pretty good or did you have to, fight and claw and scratch? There's my dog barking.
Yeah.
Give me 1 second, man.
No worries.
I'll have to go handle her.
No.
Oh. So when I say struggle, like and whatever we're talking about is, so you said you started on the quick lube. Tell us what that was like. Were you just paid an hourly with an incentivized or bonus, or
Mm-hmm.
did they just throw you the flat rate right away?
So when I first worked there, in the time that I have worked there, we went through three different managers. The hiring manager that took me on, I loved him. He was great. I started at hourly. The reason I wanted to be lube tech is because at Burger King, they wanted me to be a shift manager making $9 an hour, but I could start as a lube tech for $10 an hour. So to me, that was a no brainer. I might as well do something that is interesting and not have to worry about all the managerial duties of Burger King.
For sure.
Started at $10 an hour. There was no incentivizes or incentives then. For about the first possibly year, I was just in the lube bay, and my manager noticed every time I would walk from the lube bay to the service drive, that I would always be looking into the main shop, because back then it was just papers. We didn't have any digital inspection that we could do to make it easier. So he asked me one day, he's like, would you want to be an apprentice for one of the guys? And I said, sure, I'd love to know more. One of the guys, and I won't say names, but I was an apprentice under two different techs. One tech, I was an apprentice for him for about a year and a half. Learned a lot. He was GTR certified. Eventually, when diesels in 2016 came, he was also diesel certified. So I learned a lot from him. And then management wanted me to be more of a like a lube bay manager. But this other in that time frame, the hiring manager that I had went on to Infinity, and he was the manager at that shop. He got pretty much a raise, promotion, whatever you want to call it. So one of the service writers got his position as a service manager. And with him, I would say for the majority of me being there, he was the main manager. And there were some very questionable things that he's done while I was there. But what frustrated me, what he wanted me to do is be a lube tech manager essentially, so that the tires don't fall off, that all the cars get done in an orderly fashion, that we can have a great time. But he never specifically told the lube guys there that that's what my position was. He says, I want you to get the guys to listen to you, and but I'm not going to tell them that that's what you're supposed to do.
Right.
I'm like, okay, I'll try my best. But the kids that were hired, they were just there trying to make a paycheck, and they didn't want to listen to me.
Yeah.
Since there wasn't someone who's like 40 years old over them telling them what to do, I'm just maybe 4 years older than them
Yeah.
or whatever it might be. So they didn't want to listen to me. So I just went to the manager and I said, this isn't going to work. And then I started being an apprentice with a different tech because the other tech did ask for someone that was knowledgeable and could get work done fast. So I went with another tech, and someone from Blue Bay took my position with the first tech to be an apprentice with him. For about another year, I was with him. And then we implemented um, an express tech kind of position where instead of the cars, when you would in Lube recommend a drive belt or whatever it might be that Lube can't do, the service writer would have to try to find a tech to do that job.
Right.
Well, if you're stuck on an engine, you can't just pull that off the lift and do a quick brake job. So we had the B techs in the Express that would do those easy jobs. Now, I made great money doing that, but it was boring after a while.
Yeah.
Just all day, every day, only doing brakes or fluid services. So when the the guy that I was an apprentice with, he and I both transitioned into that, but he was the main one getting money. I was still technically an apprentice making hourly wage, and he was whatever his pay plan was. I don't know. I never asked, never pried. Didn't matter to me.
Yeah.
But him and I were both kind of over that because he used to get paid for a percentage on any job that we would do. And then the manager said, okay, well, you're no longer going to get paid for doing batteries or things like this. So he was fed up. He's like, well, what am I in this position for? I can make more money as my own self as a normal tech instead of managing two guys in the Express.
Right.
So he came to the offer for me saying, do you want to go back to mainline with me as an apprentice? And I said, hell yeah, I'm bored of just doing the basic stuff all day long. For about another year, I was with him. And then that manager was like, I think you're ready to go on your own. And for myself, I was like, well, I'm not, I don't really know if I am or not, but we can give it a go and see how it is. So I finally went flat rate after about, I want to say 4.5 years, maybe 5 years of working there.
Right.
And it was a bit of a struggle at first. I never got sent to like basic electrical or any of those Nissan certified classes because that manager at the time, to me, it felt like he only cared about making the shop money. And if you have to send your tech and spend up to $3,000 for them to go get training, that takes money out of the shop.
Right.
And him and his manager, it just felt like his only goal was to make the shop money. But he failed to realize that Nissan gives incentives for your mechanics to go to training
Yeah.
and be certified in specialty training or whatever it might be. I think one of the main reasons why he ended up losing his jobs is because now I never went to the Better Business Bureau or whatever it might be for it, but he started making it so that if you had a car that you were working on and you broke something on it, you would have to pay for it. But he did it secretly. We told him, the whole shop said no. If we're being negligent, yes, we'll pay for it. But if we're just doing something and replacing it, that should not come out of our pockets.
No, it's just part of the business, right? Like you can't always,
Yeah.
if especially the older stuff, right? If you're trying to get some of the pieces of the dash apart or pulling the door panel,
Mm-hmm.
do a window regulator, something like that, stuff happens, and
Yep.
it starts with communication at the front counter with the customer saying, hey, we're not going in there all ham-fisted and, gorilla, but
Yeah.
you got an older car here, or stuff can happen. This can happen. You're going to be aware of this. Are you willing to risk it or not? Yes or no? The
Yeah.
customer, it doesn't necessarily mean everything needs a new door panel every time you put a window regulator in, as an example, right? But there are some things where it's like people come back and it's just like, I got to make the customer, happy, which means the tech
Yeah.
has got to take more money than they made on the job and pay for something that was completely unavoidable. And, if it would have happened to anybody else in the shop, because we know there's some jobs that it doesn't matter who would have touched it, it's just going to go that way.
Yeah.
Then how is it fair to still charge the tech?
But the thing that none of us realized until after a few months, that he disregarded our request and he secretly pulled money from our paychecks to put in a fund or whatever he called it.
Yeah.
And when we found that out, the main text went to the general manager of all the stores in the area. And he was like, oh, yeah, that's not right. And so none of us knew really how much money was taken from our paychecks, but we got a check for $700, all of us. So that must have been at least the base amount that everyone had taken from their paychecks. And the shitty thing is, we get that paycheck and then it's also taxed. So if you're taking money from our paycheck that's already being taxed and then you give us our money back and then that's taxed again, it was awful. So he lasted another few months after that, and then we got another manager, and he went to a different store as just a um, why am I drawing a blank? Just the service writer. And the new manager took over. This was maybe 2022 sometime. And man, that when he was brought on, it was more so, okay, we need to make the shop more money. Because again, that's all that they really cared about. And so they started implementing practices that just to every single one of our techs, and we've had many shop meetings saying what your service writers are doing and what they're being told to do is driving customers away, and we're not making money. How that manager told the service writers to do it is, as soon as the car comes in, look at the mileage, tell them the fluid services that they need. And if they come in with a concern, let's say they come in with, my car has a sound, or I need this looked at. Okay, well, they would off the bat say, you're due for these services. Would you like to take care of any of them? And they were trained well to do that. So the customer would say, okay, well, let's do this, that, and the other, these fluid services, and get the car looked at. Well, there'd be times where I look at it and I'm like, well, they need a whole control arm, or let's say a safety item.
Yeah.
And then they would be like, well, I don't want to tell the customer that they need this because I already sold these services and they got a bonus for those fluid services. We use BG products. So if you get a certain amount of sales, BG sends you a bonus in a little credit card, whatever. And so if a customer has a $500, let's say, budget, if that job is going to add an additional $600, well, let's just do the fluid services today and then they can come back for whatever later.
Important repair.
And I'm like, well, screw the fluid services. The guy needs brakes, or the guy needs this, that, and the other. And on one of our shop meetings, we told our manager, that's not how it needs to be done. Let us make the recommendation of what it needs, because countless times they would sell a 30K on a car with no power steering fluid, and there would be a line for power steering fluid.
Yeah.
So they didn't even know what the cars do or do not have for us to correctly do it. So then when I say, hey man, this Rogue doesn't have power steering fluid, he'd be like, oh, well, let's do this other service instead, since it's the same amount of money. And I'm like, or you could tell the customer that, hey, I messed up. Your car doesn't have power steering fluid. we could do this instead. Like, yeah, the customer might not know this, that, and the other. And at the end of the day, you could say, well, is it really harming the customer because they approved this amount of money? Well, to all of us techs, yes, it does, because that's another, let's say $150 for a power steering flush that they could have kept in their pocket for whatever they may need. And that
And they
was very, very frustrating.
and they could have bought a belt instead, like a
Yeah.
drive, or they could have bought. Well, they might not have been able to buy a whole control arm, but a link. Like I mean,
Mm-hmm.
not that you and I know is familiar with that product. To me, Eric, what it sounds like is they were really trying to motivate their service writers to actually start selling.
Yes.
But it sounds like, and I want to hope that they were, if you sell $500, it shouldn't matter whether it's $500 on fluid or $500 on a control arm job with an alignment. You should
Yeah.
still get the same commission on $500. But it sounds like they were using BG to push them to make some money.
Yeah.
And weren't even the same insistence on selling $500 for a safety repair versus $500 for fluid. I'm just like you. I would be like over the moon, pissed with
Mm-hmm.
that. Be up in arms because it's just complete nonsense. Like we're not advocating, as I like to say, for the customer when we do it that way. I'm not against fluid services. Don't get me wrong. Cars need to be maintained. They need to be serviced. Everybody should be working to sell to make some money.
Of course.
But like priority always has to be on the safety stuff, not on fluids. And when
Mm-hmm.
they're like, I'm like you, when they're selling a power steering flush on a Rogue that you never flush the fluid in it because they're almost all electronic, like what
Mm-hmm.
sense in that? I mean, yes, some of the Nissan power steering systems that are electronic still have a fluid, but I've never seen an interval to change it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And then another, like, a company sent me out a brake fluid tester.
Mm-hmm.
So I would start using that, not just for the videos, but I actually wanted to know if the customer needed to have their brake fluid done. Just because it looks dark doesn't mean it's bad.
Right.
And I believe the Nissan interval is every 60,000 miles for brake fluid,
So what
not 30,000 or 3 years, something like that.
when I
But
was
we would recommend it every 15,000.
yeah, I was going to say when I left up in Canada, we're on the metric system. They were selling because it was .4, and they're saying it's super hydroscopic, which it is. It absorbs a lot
Mm-hmm.
more water than 3. They were selling sometimes every 20,000 kilometers. So like we would do it where every other oil change, it was getting because they would push the oil change interval to 10. Every other oil change, we're doing a brake fluid flush. Like I've never
Yeah.
flushed so much brake fluid until I started working for Nissan, and then you saw all the ABS recalls, right? They had to do the modules and all that jazz.
Yep.
Like we,
Those paid good money. I
yeah,
enjoyed doing those.
yeah. But like you'd flush one in and the next month the recall's out, and you're flushing it again for
Yeah.
this time under warranty, right? Like if I was a customer, I'd be PO'd big time.
Yep.
But I never got behind that way of doing things.
Mm-hmm.
Everything was a brake flush and an air filter, brake flush and air filter. It was ridiculous.
Yeah. There was this one service writer that I could not stand him because of his, I would say, moral code. Um, there'd be many times where I say, "Hey, this car needs this, that, and the other," and he says, "Oh, just don't put that down," or "We need to get this sold instead. They came in for this X, Y, and Z, whatever." And I would tell my other coworkers that I'm like, I am this close to telling this guy I'm never working for your cars again.
Yeah.
And one day a Pathfinder came in. I think it was a 2017 Pathfinder. They came in with some issue. It was like a check engine light. I can't remember exactly what the check engine light was for at this point because it's been over a year and a half.
Yeah.
But they came in. He sold fluid services and spark plugs along with a bunch of other stuff on the service drive. Well, I never start doing a job until I think you froze again.
No,
Nope,
I'm still
didn't
here.
freeze. Okay. On my end, your screen just froze. Anyways, so I always wait until I see. So this eventually we did get electronic MPIs, and I can see every step when the MPI goes to the parts department for parts pricing, and then when it gets sent to the service writer, I can see how long the service writer has had it before sending that quote to the customer. And if they come in for a check engine light, but also $1,000 worth of fluid services and spark plugs, whatever the amount may be, I don't do anything on it until I get that back of what the customer has greenlit and what they've denied. And I'm just sitting. About an hour later, I say, "Hey man, have you gotten this sent to the customer?" He's like, "Oh, just start working on it and I'll send it to the customer." I'm like, "No, I'm not starting this job until you tell the customer their options, because they might not want to do the fluid services and they want to do this instead." And it was maybe 3:30, and usually I leave at 5. He's like, "Man, you still haven't started it?" I'm like, "No, you haven't sent the customer the quote for him to say what they want or don't want. I'm not touching this. I don't care." And he finally got the quote back and everything was greenlit. I'm like, "Okay, cool. The customer is aware of it." But in that program, I can see the total amount per line item. And it showed $1,700 for the spark plug line. And I'm like, that is on a Pathfinder. It's 3.2 hours for spark plugs, and the spark plugs are like $17 each times 6.
Yeah.
That job should be $600, $700 on its own, because the shop rate at the time was 180 per hour or whatever it might have been. So I went to the dispatcher, who's also the assistant manager, and I said, "This isn't right. You need to find out why this is literally doubled for the spark plugs." And this service writer has done things like that before, where he charges extra on a line item where I put 2 hours, it might be 3 hours or whatever. Or he's like, "I'll get you on the next one so you don't get paid on a job." And then the next one, the customer gets charged 3 hours when it should be a 2 hour job.
Yeah.
And so the assistant manager came back to me. He's like, "Okay, so the customer approved the spark plugs to begin with, and then when you made the recommendation, it was put in double, and that's why it was put in double." And I'm like, "You think I believe that he didn't see that and didn't go like, well, let me change it and make it right?" No, he did that on purpose, I guarantee, because he's done shit like that before. And the assistant manager even said, "Yeah, we know he does sketchy stuff sometimes, but we'll get it taken care of." I ended up finishing the car for the price that it should have been. But after that, I said, "I am never doing a single job for him ever again. I don't care what you say. You cannot make me do a job for him. You will have to fire me if you make me do a job for him." And then my motorcycle accident happened.
Isn't
And even though,
let's back up here for a minute. Isn't that disgusting though, that like they literally come to you and they say, "Yeah, we'll take care of it." So we know we have a guy who's charging double on a job of what it should cost to the
yep,
customer. But we're going to protect that service writer because, like, let's be real, he's making us money.
yep,
That whole part, and see, there's always been a double standard in this industry, or not so much necessarily double standard, because if a technician did that, the shop would throw the technician under the bus so fast and make an example of him, string him up, pelt him in the street with stones, like, and tell the customers and probably put it on the news. Look what we did. We had a guy in our midst and he was terrible and we got rid of him. Look how great we are. But I've seen it countless times when advisors are doing sketchy stuff like that, and the manager looks the other way and goes, "Don't worry, we'll handle it." I can tell you why they look the other way. It's because this is my problem with incentivized pay in this industry, period, is because it just trickles down. Everybody allows sketchy stuff to happen because everybody relies on that sketchy stuff for their paycheck. It's
yep.
disgusting. Sorry, my own little
That's
rant
all
there.
good. It's all good. So when I
So,
got back, what was that?
so you had the motorcycle accident.
Yeah, so I had the motorcycle accident. I was gone for 2 months completely to heal. And then I got back. And of course, I was quote unquote desperate for work because I didn't have my short term disability anymore.
Right.
And the dispatcher would come out bring me tickets, and I would see that service writer's name on it. And I would just go back, put the paperwork down on his desk, and he's like, "Don't you want money?" And I said, I told you, I don't care what it is. If I told you I don't want to work on his cars, that means I'm not going to work on his cars." And the dispatcher says, "Well, eventually we're going to need to talk to the service manager and figure this out because you can't just not do his work." And I'm like, "You can try me." Like I've been there for almost 9 years at that point. So I was kind of comfortable knowing that, like, short of blowing a customer's car up or whatever, like, I'm not going to get fired because I'm valuable to the company.
Yeah.
So I said, "You can try me. Like, I'm not doing his work." And there'd be times where I don't know if the dispatcher would do it on purpose or if he's just not paying attention. But
Right.
here and there, I would still get those ROs and I would just bring them back, put them on the desk, and say, "No, I'm not working on his stuff." And also, I found out since I've quit Nissan that another tech has also said that he's not doing that service writer's work.
Yeah, that
And
service
then
writer still works there.
he still works there to this day. I went to Nissan to do some stuff on my Xterra,
Right.
and he's still working there. Like, now I don't harbor any grudge. Like, I would be pissed at him and not even talk to him when I work there.
Right.
But now it's not my problem. I have no control. So when I come into the shop and say hey to everyone, I'm cordial. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not going to harbor anything. It's in the past. It doesn't matter to me. I have no say.
Yeah.
But yes, he still does work there. And in our parts department, I want to say, had an amazing parts department. They would get our parts quotes really good. Sometimes there would be mistakes like getting the wrong part, but everyone has that and that's
Yeah.
understandable. However, the parts manager, I don't know the exact reason why he left, but he started working for another shop after being at that Nissan for 20 years. And then he pretty much took almost every single guy with him to the new shop.
Yeah.
And then our shop had to scramble and find a new manager. And this was about the time when I was also getting back from my accident, and I was contemplating of not being a mechanic anymore because I just physically couldn't do it. And I know the techs that have gone into the parts department, they make more money.
Hmm.
It's less work. You make more money being in the parts department.
Which is crazy when you think about it, right? That the
Yeah.
technician leaves the bay and can make more money working in the parts department. Now, I got asked, and so the parts guys, are they on commission of some type, or how is that
They
just?
make a percentage of sales.
Yeah. So see, which it's that whole thing again. Like I've always said that I think service writers should be on some type of commission. I think, in fact, if you got a technician on one side and an advisor on the other, I think most of the time this industry would be right to make sure that the advisor's on a commission and not necessarily the technician, because the advisor
Yeah.
needs to be. I've seen too many lazy, unmotivated advisors than I've ever seen lazy, unmotivated techs, to put it that
Yep.
way. So, but parts people, I'm on the fence about that. You know what I mean? Because it's like, yes, you want the guy to be, or gal to know, okay, every little part that's supposed to go with this repair. You know what it's like.
Mhm.
You want all the bolts that are supposed to be changed. You want all the gaskets when that tranny comes out, the whole thing. But the fact that they can leave the bay and go into parts and make more money,
Mhm.
your dealership, man, had it all screwed up, like how stuff
Yeah.
was down.
So I did try. I asked my service manager because I didn't want to just go behind his back
Mm-hmm.
because, of course, they would need to find someone to replace me.
Yep.
I said, "Are you okay with me making this transition? Because physically, I'm hurting here. Like, I need to be able to make money, but also chill out." And
Yeah.
he says, "Yes, that's fine." And I went to go talk to one of the main guys that was still there before he left to that other shop. And he's like, "Oh, well, the new service manager brought all of his guys from the shop that he came from. So there's no room. Like, you can't, there's not even a spot for you to come in." And so I just kind of wrote that off. And I'm like, okay, well, I guess I can't go into parts because they've already filled it. And Oh, the new guys that came on, they were, I think, from Hyundai, and they didn't know Nissans at all, and their system was different. So I would say if you ever need me to show you on the diagram the exact part that I need, I'll do that. Like, that helps me and you.
Mm-hmm.
And there was one time where I came up and said, "Hey, do you need me to show you what part I need?" He's like, "No, I know what you're talking about." Okay, cool. And then I get the part, open the box, wrong part.
Yeah.
Like, I even offered to give you, like,
Mm-hmm.
show you the exact part that I need. And maybe that could have been a part of them just wanting to be able to do it themselves, which is fine.
Yeah.
But if you genuinely don't know the answer, don't pretend that you know the answer.
Yeah.
This can go from any part of dealership or any job ever. Just ask. You don't have to feel like your ego is going to get hurt by just saying, "Hey, I don't know this thing. Can you show me?"
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of people get caught up in that. And I'd say someone who brings a lot of light to that is Chris, when
Yes.
he makes his videos about what's the difference between a tech and the service writer. Like, should this happen? Should that happen? He's been in the industry too, and he knows how to kind of put it into perspective. Like, these sides need to work together instead of getting pissed off at each other. And I don't know, like in my shop, I've only been in the one shop, so I can't say for 100% sure, but it just feels like money hampers that completely.
Yeah.
Like,
Well,
if,
what Chris talks about a lot is, and like you said, is he shines light on, a lot of the times where so many of the same scenarios happen. It doesn't matter where. The only thing that changes is the address and the brand. It always seems to have the same problems and how the
yeah,
networking goes within the dealership. And he's not. We're talking about, for people that aren't aware, we're talking about Chris Craig, Chris MF Craig on TikTok. I've had him on as a guest before. He's fantastic. He'll be back again as another guest. But he really shows light with how the different communication breaks down between the different departments within the dealership. The same thing, like what you alluded to, customers coming in for pre-sold maintenance packages of whatever, A schedule, B schedule, and the car needs, work for safety. How is that supposed to be handled? Well, safety is always supposed to be done first. End of story. There's no
hmm,
argument for that. I don't care, you know. But it goes so much deeper than that, where he talks about like whose responsibility should it be to look up the parts, whose responsibility should be to get the parts correctly, like all that kind of stuff. He's just great. So I it sounds like your dealership, man, is just too many people that are relying so heavy on that commission just to get like a decent living wage.
yeah,
Nobody is doing well what they should be doing. I'm still stuck in this. My head's pounding on the wall, figuratively trying to understand how a technician can make more money in parts. I've
yeah,
never in my career have I seen that in my life. It is just
hmm,
so asinine and backwards to me that even worked. They should know. That's just ludicrous.
I know on a base scale, any part sold to customer is upped by 30%.
Mhm.
And for techs, if you buy a part, it's up by 10%. So the shop's still making money, and that's fine. Like,
Yeah.
um, but man, that beyond just service and parts, like even our sales team,
Mhm.
I stopped buying cars there because I got a 2006 Infinity M35 and I paid 9 grand for it.
Mhm.
Well, I found out that they took that car on trade for 3,000. It
Yeah.
had 168,000 miles, or no, 268,000 miles. Sorry. And when I hit a deer, it ended up having 274,000 miles. And it was a bulletproof car. I loved it. But after that, I never bought a single car from that dealership because I knew that I wasn't going to get any type of employee discount. Typically, it's 500 over what the dealership got the car for. But my dealership would say, "Oh, it's just you don't pay for the check-in for like the oil change and all that stuff. That's your employee discount." And the one guy that I loved to work with, he he was always straight up to me or any customers. He was at that dealership for a very long time. When I was gone through my motorcycle accident, I found out that he quit, and I asked why he quit, and it turns out he had a friend that wanted service trucks, like the cargo vans,
Yeah.
and he bought, oh, I don't know, let's say 4 or 6. I don't know the true number, but a decent amount. And when you sell multiple cars in one deal, that's a great paycheck for the sales team
Yeah.
or for that salesman. However, he couldn't get that deal because another service or another salesman was the guy that worked and did the deals on the cargo stuff.
Right.
So the deal had to go to that other guy, and he didn't get anything. So he's like, screw this, I'm done, I'm gone.
I would
So like
too.
you lose an amazing salesperson
Yeah.
because you have to keep with the, oh, this guy always does
Fleet
X,
sale.
Y, and Z. Like it shouldn't matter. You brought in this person to make the sale. You're the one who should get that commission. And so it's just bad practices here and there that I don't understand. And I mean, that dealership has been in business for longer than I've been alive.
Mm.
So, of course, they must be doing something right in a monetary sense to keep themselves up, but the cost of good people.
Well, I can tell you, Eric, that I wish I could tell you that it gets better.
No.
I can tell you that you've been doing this like 10 years and I've been doing it like 30. Every dealer that I've ever been at sounds exactly like that one. And it's had the
Mhm.
same thing and they all are the same. It's like it's their culture or something. Like, that salesman that did that contact that sold, say, like 6 NVs, right? 6 NV vans, just as hypothetical stuff. If he brings a person in to buy 6 and it's a fleet sale and it has to go to a fleet manager and be processed, that's fine. I understand it, right? Like fleet is a different thing to sell. That salesman still deserves a really good kind of check or a bonus or
Mhm.
something. Maybe it can't be the full amount because policy is policy, you know. But it to say you get nothing.
Mhm.
But I've said it so many times, man. And most people don't that listen to me are probably not a dealer owner, so I don't care if they do. When you work for a dealer owner, what you're working for is you're working for what is already a millionaire who is trying to build themselves into being a multimillionaire, and it's just part of their portfolio.
Yep.
So they don't really care too much about the people that work for them. I don't care if you own a dealership, you want to come on and argue that fact with me. Great. I'm all for it. Let's hear it.
Mhm.
Because it hasn't been shown to me. I could show you millions of people, hundreds of testimonials that all say differently, that they're just treated like a number. And I'm not trying to say that everybody is, like you gotta lose money to keep everybody happy. I'm not necessarily saying that, but like we know people that have been around a dealership a long time. I wish I could say that, some are good, but so far they all
Yep.
look the same to me. The only thing that changes is the brand and the address. So
For
yeah.
me, I would say the dealership, when they would need to take care of the customer, that's
Mm,
one thing that they always did do.
yeah.
Like
Have
if a mechanic screws up, or let's say something goes wrong, the customer will get taken care of because, of course, we want that repeat business.
Yep.
But sometimes it's at the cost of a mechanic who had no control over it,
Mm-hmm.
where they have enough money to pay the tech internally
Yeah.
for the hours missed out or whatever. Now, that just wouldn't really happen,
No.
sadly. So there would be, if I had a tally of all the cars that I've done where they're like, oh, the customer's pissed off, I'll get you on the next one, and then I never get on the next one. It's
Yeah.
I'd I'd have another year's worth of salary probably.
Be a lot more than
Um,
$700. I'll tell you
yeah.
that. Yeah.
So it's just it's crazy that, and when I would talk to other people, like let's say for a transmission issue on a Chevy, I would talk to Brandon and be like,
Mm-hmm.
"Hey, I need some clarification on this because my dealership only had all data. We didn't
Correct.
have any other type of system where we could look up information, and all that. I just didn't have the information that I needed. So I'd have to reach out to someone else, and thankfully I would be able to get that information and fix the car correctly.
Right.
So also with Brandon, I know we've talked about him saying I didn't get much
Mentorship.
training and mentorship.
Yeah.
I did, but I didn't. I got a very basic, like, this is how you replace a transmission, like a
Yes.
technical mentorship of this is how you do this X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
And the last and still current manager, he knew the value of sending techs to training. And I was one of the first guys to get sent to training when he started working there. Finally went to California, got my basic electrical, passed first try. It was a great learning experience. I learned that, okay, I can do this test for this issue or whatever. And it did help bolster my diag skills, more so because I understood the fundamentals. There'd be
Hmm.
times where I would have my multimeter and be like, okay, why am I not getting voltage on this blower motor? I'm not getting 12 volts. Well, I didn't realize it's what's the correct word? Stepper motor,
Yeah.
that you start with half a volt and then go up from there. So just getting that class done helped me understand that. Now there's a big debate of is going to places like a tech school worth it or this, that, and the other. And I can say that it probably is. Now there's a difference between having real world experience and just being a tech, and you have to put those two together to be able to have a better understanding of what you're working on.
Yeah.
I know
I
there would be guys that came into the shop that they came from a tech school and they had a better understanding than guys that have been in the industry for 30 years.
hmm Yep. I say it like this. When I was at the dealership, now I got mentored. I was lucky. A couple guys mentored me really well in like, how do you make hours? How does this job? Here's your shortcuts for this repair. Here's your shortcuts for that repair. Like you said, a transmission re something like that. And then I had some other guys that were like, they could mentor me in like, this is what the data when you're looking at it on the screen really means, right? And
Yeah.
that helped me a lot because I enjoyed it. I gravitated towards it. But in this industry, you can mentor people two ways. You can mentor them in a dealership to just how they turn hours. And there's
Hmm.
so much more to that than just like the shortcuts on the job. It can become kind of sketchy where like guys immediately go, no fault found. I
Hmm.
didn't hear anything wrong with that car. I couldn't find it. And it goes back out and they sit there and they wait on that gravy ticket, right? At some point, everybody has to start doing the hard work. And this
Yep.
is where, the dealerships are failing because, like you said, you can have two technicians in the same dealership with the same certs. You pay them the same amount per hour, but you know that one is stronger than the other at getting to the cause of the problem.
Yep.
Why is the customer complaint? What are they there for? If we're trying to tell everybody that you just have to work harder to make more hours to make the pay, it's absolutely stupid. Certs don't even matter, right? You have to fight constantly for your hourly rate. And then even that, if your hourly rate is really high, but you're not getting the good work, you're getting the nightmare after nightmare after nightmare,
Yep.
it doesn't work either. And that's where we have to, that's not even a dealership thing. That can be when we talk to shops that still want to pay their technicians flat rate. If you got a guy and you're only paying $1 more an hour than your guy that can't solve a problem, where's the incentive all of a sudden to fix all those cars if
Hmm.
at the end of the week we're only $40 difference because of maybe hours turned? It doesn't make any sense, right? And I don't know the exact. You can't put a numerical value on it and go, this is what this technician's worth. But if you got a guy that can always get to the problem, that has that critical thinking skill, they're worth double what your guy that can just turn hours is worth.
Yeah.
He's worth double. Whatever you want to slice it, how you pay him. He should be taking home twice as much. Just as simple as
Yep.
that. You know, they have
And
to.
there'd be some times where you get guys that are just there to make hours, and
Hmm?
you try your best to say, so there was a B tech. I don't know if he still is there or not, but he would come up and say, hey, can you show me how to program a key?
Hmm.
I'm like, sure. Next week, hey, can you show me how to program a key? Just keep asking. I'm like, dude, it literally in the console tells you step by step how
Yeah.
to program the key. Now I understand there's certain nuances that the console doesn't say that you have to do. And I get that because I had that same struggle. But if you have several different texts showing you how to program a key and you just can't learn how to do it, then you're not here to actually because you're not here because you actually like the job.
Yeah.
You're It's just a job and you don't care that it gets done right. And for me, I was next to a guy that him and I got along really well, and that's why we were put next to each other because I could help him, he could help me, and this, that, and the other. But if I had an issue, I would go on trying to find tech line cases, this, that, and the other, see if it's happened before. But this guy, anytime he had a squeak, he would just stop, pull into the shop, stop right where the foreman is, and say, "Hey, hop in, help me find this squeak."
Mm.
And they were good together. We always joked saying that they were like son and dad because they both looked similar. They had glasses, like their mannerisms were the same. They got along really well. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing to have at all, but on the flip side, if you always need the foreman to come over to help you fix a problem, then that's slowing you down. That's taking the foreman off of a job that when other techs can't figure something out, he's the one that would be able to, okay, he's not flat rate. He's on a salary commission, whatever it might be called, where he can figure out the harder stuff and not have to worry about turning hours.
Yeah.
And let's say if I had a car that tech lines down because Nissan system
Sucks.
very rarely works, and I'm like, okay, this is an older car. I need his guidance. I need the foreman's guidance, and he'd be gone doing a test drive with someone, not just the tech that next to me or whatever. And I would finally be able to get his help. But when I did my very first engine rebuild, starting in 2017 or was it 16? I believe from 16 to 18 for the 5.6s,
Yeah.
they had very bad engine problems
Yeah. I
and
remember.
you would have to rebuild them. And on my very first one, like I've never gone that deep into an engine before. And I asked my shop manager saying, "Hey, I'm going to need his help with for the duration because I don't want to screw anything up." And for the majority, I did get his help. And when I was putting the car back together, I've never done timing before up until this point. And so I had my foreman check my timing, make sure everything was good. And I put the car back together the rest of the way and I started up and the car's running like shit. The
Mhm.
van just doesn't have a good time. And I think it was the left bank was off by two teeth. Um, what would that have been, like 40 degrees or
Yeah, about that close.
whatever it would be. So I took the front end back off, did the timing, had him do it again. And he's like, "No, you did it right the first time. I don't know why the timing's off." And so that was a big stump to me. But I I don't know if this caused it or not because I've questioned him about it. I said, "When you had me start the engine, I asked you if I should prime it first,
Mm.
and you said no. It's fine. Just crank it right up and it'll be fine." Now in my brain I'm thinking, is that what probably caused the teeth to jump? Like there wasn't pressure to the tensioners
Yeah.
and that sprocket just turned on a loose setting. And I never got clarification, but that's internally what I'm thinking is what happened because I was on that van for a long time trying to figure out what was going on with it before I finally found out that, okay, this is the problem. And then, so I also feel if you're telling someone in the shop that, hey, you need a little bit more help, then that should be the goal of the foreman or whoever and have a little bit more structured. And you have to make sure that the customer is aware that, okay, this job is going to take a little bit longer. But at the same time, you're not going to tell the customer, hey, we have a tech who's never done an engine job before working on your car because,
Yeah.
well, me as myself, I'm not going to want to have my car worked on by someone who's never done the job before. But you have to start somewhere.
Yeah. So for some context for some people that maybe aren't quite familiar with the brand, what Eric's talking about is the 5.6 V8 that came out, like he said, around 17. And I remember seeing them in Titans the most because we didn't sell the full blown SUV that had the V8. Like, I mean, not the Pathfinder. What's above
Armada.
that one? Yeah, Armada. We never sold one when I was there. For for like 4 years, I never saw one get sold. But the 5.6s used to have really bad piston slap or piston tick or whatever you want to call it.
Mm-hmm.
And they when we first started running them, they were shipping whole long blocks, and then eventually, of course, because that gets really expensive, they started shipping just short blocks, and they only gave you like 4 extra hours, I think, to put a short block in versus the long block. So that one that you had that was like 40 out, what was the final fix on why it was out of time? Were you right in that it had to be primed before you?
So I redid the timing, and this time I did the priming procedure, and the engine worked perfect.
Yeah.
And so I took it on a drive. It had no issues. I took it home, drove it back to work, and I just made sure for another extra day that it was good. And the customer ended up taking it, and then they came back like 2 weeks later with the check engine light on, and it had another issue, and no one in the shop could really understand it, what was going on with it. It kept throwing O2 codes.
Okay.
And so I would replace the sensors, this, that, and the other, because it was still under warranty. The customer didn't have to pay for anything.
Yeah.
But nothing seemed to fix it. And then I had the DTS come out. Now the DTS, you could probably explain it a little bit better than me. The DTS came out, and he can authorize whatever. Like, you don't need pre-authorization from Nissan. So he ended up saying, okay, just flat out replace this, 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 and this. And what ended up fixing it is I had to replace the headers and the cat and the secondary cats for that code to finally go away. Now, I made it as tight as it could possibly be. I had new gaskets, new everything, but somehow with doing the engine replacement, that's caused that to happen. And my shop was horrible about getting straight time.
Yeah.
And so I never knew that if I was going to get paid for any of that time to fix it. But only because the DTS was there is what allowed me to get paid on that.
So DTS, what Eric's speaking of, is what I used to call up here around here as district service manager, which had a little bit more pull in being able to say in a certain area, yes, just go ahead and fix this car. They're not really the same as like a district. You know, we hear guys talk about from different dealers where they send in a technician from corporate, right? And he comes in and solves that. Maybe that was what was going on with your situation. But that's what I know to be as a district service manager, was somebody who could say, you've got approval, you don't have to wait and consult. Because for Nissan, before you could go on with the next repair, sometimes under warranty, you had to get it approved. And it was a long, drawn out, stupid process of emails back and forth, like you said, on a system that really worked. I hated it. I just stopped doing it. I remember we had an Armada, not an Armada, we had an NV with a V8, and it kept coming back and back and back for catalyst failures and oxygen sensor codes and whatnot. And it was it was a boomerang situation. And it ended up being that the technician that had been working on it was never getting the oxygen sensors tight enough when he was putting them back in. And they were loosening off, and then, you know, the ground goes away, and it just I hated it. I hated that Nissan is an easy product to fix. It is a nightmare of a company to navigate their service information and their processes and the policies. It's terrible. It's the worst one I've ever seen by far. And I mean, like, Hyundai, I could fix Hyundai standing on my head with my arms, tied behind my back, my eyes shut, compared to Nissan. It's just so much easier. They don't build as good a car, but like, it's going through hoops to try and fix Nissan. It was terrible. So
what time frame did you work at Nissan?
So we're going into 2025. So I want to say I started in probably 2015 and left probably by 2020.
Gotcha. So thankfully you missed the whole battery debacle. The newer cars, I think that they did not have an accurate charging system set up because they would be, I believe, the AGM batteries, and these batteries would get fried.
Yeah.
Like, I was replacing a battery a day,
Mm-hmm.
and every tech pretty much was. And I don't know if Nissan didn't believe, but they made it so that you had to get pre-authorization. Doesn't matter the dealership. It's not that we were on ARC or had any restrictions with our dealership specifically,
Yeah.
but global or maybe just North America wide, if you had to do a battery, you couldn't just have the printout slip.
Yeah.
They had, I think when you were working there, they had the GR8
Yes.
battery tester. Since then, they got a new battery tester called the DC8 8000 from Midtronics. And then we also had handheld battery testers from Midtronics as well. Now, when you hook up the DC8 8000 to it, it would register and you did a whole system test with starting the car, whatever, it would come back failed battery.
Yeah.
Well, Nissan told us, no, don't believe that. You have to do the battery test with the handheld tool, which
Mm-hmm.
doesn't have the diagnostic power as the DC8000, then charge it for a half an hour
Yeah.
on the DC8000, then test it again with the handheld. You could not test it with the big machine. And so, of course, after you charge a battery for a half an hour, you're going to get a good test result.
Of course. Yeah.
So
Unless
then you have to send a customer out saying, sorry, we can't do anything. We know your battery's bad. Just come back another time when your car doesn't start.
so
Well, then how does that piss off a customer?
so it's funny we get onto this topic because I was just telling this story to a friend. Backstory. Battery was the reason I finally was my last straw at the Nissan store because just like you were talking about, we would have starting to have issues with age, and it was probably a Sentra or something like that. But I remember that a customer bought a Sentra. It had sat on the lot a long time. There's a whole bunch of processes that are supposed to be done with cars that sit on the lot, right? Like what's really supposed to happen is they're supposed to be started up and idled up and charged back up, and certain fuses are supposed to be removed and all that, yada, yada, yada. That never gets done at any dealer I've ever worked at because they're not paying people to do it. So this guy buys this car, Sentra. Battery at this point, 6 months old. You know, of course, the salesman goes and boosts it, sells him the car. He drives the car home, takes the car home, parks the car for the next 2 months. He takes a bus everywhere, has to go, and never gets in the car. He goes out to the car one day and it won't start. He calls AAA. They boost the car. He brings it down to the dealership. I run a test on it. Of course, it's all charged up. He's a waiter, by the way, which is even stupider. And I go, there's nothing, the battery passes. I'm using the little handheld that we're supposed to be using. It says it passes. I know what this car needs at this point, but I can't fail the battery without a slip that says the battery's bad.
Yep.
So the customer leaves. He's gone another 2 months. Doesn't use the car. It's got 17 kilometers on it since it was last there, which is the time, the travel distance to get it back home. He parks it again, shuts the key off, goes in, takes the bus everywhere for the next two. Why the guy even bought a brand new car in the first place, I don't know. But whatever, it's irrelevant. It gets boosted again, brought back. This time they started as a comeback. Now, I'm the type of person, when you give me a comeback, if I'm legit, like it's mine, but when you play that kind of game, which we know what this game is at this point, it's nothing I'm doing wrong, right?
Mhm.
It's a lack of communication between the customer and the service writer and policy and all that jazz. Be ready to watch the bearded guy get angry. So anyway, so I now have to know that if I put a battery in this car, it's because the last two times they're not paying me for nothing. I'm not getting paid the last two times. The first time and the second time it's in. So process at the time policy was you needed printed slips that said the battery is bad. Now, Eric has probably done this or seen it done, and I'm going to say that lots of other people have had to do it too. You go into where the battery cores are, and you put the machine on, and you find the battery core that will fail, and you get your
Yep.
printout. So I get two printouts that say battery's defective because forever you needed two, not just one, two. I go and put them on the desk with the writer, and the service writer, tower guy, looks at me and he says, now realize that I'm not even gotten paid yet. Like this is all zero. He says, actually, you need 3. I lost my ever loving, I flipped my lid. And I said, well, then you go get the effing
Yeah.
third. Of course, I got counseled for how I spoke to the tower dispatch and to the service writer, because I said, this is so stupid. This car doesn't even need a battery. We need to explain to the customer that if he's going to park it for 2 months, we need to remove the radio fuse, right? Move it around so that it's not drawing on the stupid thing. It's like talking to the wall. They didn't want to hear it. So that was my story about how batteries cost me my final day at the Nissan store.
Yep.
Thank God for that customer, because it was onward and upward to better things. But this is the reality for people that are listening that have never worked in a dealership. What Eric and I are talking about is the reality of what we face every day. It's not like we don't make this stuff up. The people that are on social media and, Dealer Plate Guy and Chris, and this is all very real to us. We get flashbacks, trauma from these stories that we tell because it's happened. So yeah, I can remember the GR8. I can remember never using it because it was slow. It was a good tool. Don't get me wrong. It's a great tool. But I'm still at the point that even those little handheld testers as a diagnostic tester for a battery, there's still a lot to be said for a carbon pile and what you're actually trying to do. So, and again, if the dealers are forever hating to warranty batteries because most of them get kicked back because the shop, the OE looks at when it was installed in the car. Was it actually like the process, which is every week it's supposed to be started up, idled, charge the battery back up? Why didn't they not do that? Because they take delivery of them with almost no fuel in them, and they put no fuel in them until they're sold. So you can't leave them sitting there idling for 10 minutes every week because there is no gas in the stupid things. This is the this is the reality of us that have worked at a dealer before. This is what we face, this nonsense all day long. So when you wonder why some of us that come from a dealer are the way we are, this is why. Shit like this. Sorry, Eric, go ahead, man.
That's all good. I'll pose this question to you. How hard do you think it'd be to work on any brand when your diagnostic tool doesn't work?
Oh, it'd be impossible. Absolutely impossible.
Now, you know how Nissan's system would go down.
All the time.
When you were working there, the system wasn't fully online.
Yeah.
You had cards in the computers if you needed to do a key reprogram or if you needed to do any bidirectional functionality, you could just do it without having the console hooked up to the internet. They made it a cloud-based system.
Yeah.
You have to have the console hooked up to internet to even pull codes most of the time or do anything. So when the system's down or Nissan pushes out a bad update, you're trying to read codes on a car, and an hour later, you finally find out that there's something wrong with it.
Yeah.
And you don't get paid for that time of you trying to diagnose why the Nissan computer is not working.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's terrible. And when he says bad update, he's not kidding. Like, I can remember countless software updates that were out, and then we got a notice next week saying, don't do that update. There's another one coming because we effed it up. The software's wrong. Like, that's not just something we make up. That's real, legit. I know that guys I talk to in the aftermarket, they absolutely hate Nissan when it comes to the reprogramming side of it because, like, their interface, what we talk to, is different than what they get access to, right?
Yep.
So it's always behind there. It's just awful. It's the worst. I can tell you that what only survived for me at Nissan is by the time I was at Nissan, we had an Identifix account and I had a Snap-on Solus. So I was using more times than not, I was using the Snap-on Solus that I was very familiar with, and I was using Mitchell or All Data or Identifix for my service information.
Yep.
Anything was 2-3 years old because it was easier to navigate. The way they set up, it sounds so counterintuitive, but they would have their connectors in one section of their service information, their wiring diagram in another, and they were always showing you the flip side of the connector view. Like, you never knew what you were looking at in the connector view, whether you were looking at it like staring into it unplugged or whether you were looking at it from behind. It was awful. It was terrible. Worst brand I've ever worked on in my life. I'm a smart guy and I go home thinking I was dumb so many days trying to navigate.
I think since I've only known Nissan, the connector view, They could have updated it, but it was easy for me because you could toggle a switch. Do you want to look at it pin side or other side? You can toggle which way that you want to go. So I could look at that wiring diagram and I could be like, okay, this goes here, this goes there, that goes there. But sometimes it would be incomplete. You
Mm,
don't have
yeah.
the whole thing like, okay, there's, if you need to, I don't know if you've ever seen this bulletin. Why they didn't just update it within the ESM is freaking beyond me. But when I was doing, I think it's a 2017 or 2018 Ultima, when you're doing the calibration for the radar system
Yeah.
for the like automatic braking and
Yeah.
whatnot, you have to enter in values of whatever it might be. So you would go to ESM, it would tell you these are the base values that you have to put in, and the board will like figure everything else out.
Yeah.
And so you'd put the values in and it wouldn't go. It would be impossible. You couldn't do it. They made a bulletin saying, hey, use these values instead, and then it would work. Okay, why create a bulletin instead of just fixing the ESM to begin
Exactly.
with? When a tech makes, they sometimes they would send out emails asking, what are issues that you were having with consoles or this, that, and the other. It just didn't seem like they actually read into any of that, because on Facebook, there's a group for Nissan/Infinity mechanics that I'm part of. And everyone would be in there being like, hey, I'm having this issue. What's going on? And someone would be like, oh, Nissan's down, or this, that, and the other. There's an issue here that hasn't been addressed. Or there was a time where I had to replace a ECM and it didn't have the steps in the correct order.
Yeah.
So you had to put in a new ECM. There's a step that was out of order for programming the TPMS. And it was like the third step, and it actually needed to be the second step. So I did it out of order and finally got it to work. And it's just like things like that. Do the people who create the ESM even have a real world person telling them exactly what needs to be done?
Yeah. No. No. And I can remember that Facebook group that you're speaking of because I was on there when I worked there, and there's some really sharp guys there. There was also some real attitude too, which I couldn't. Sounds funny coming from me because it's like I'm known on Facebook for being a bit of a, but like there was some guys that just were. They looked at it as this, and I can kind of relate now where they're coming from. But it was like if you were new to the product, but you had a question because you were new to the product, they would talk to you like if they had 10 years in, like you were just absolutely stupid.
Yeah.
And for me, that was really hard to stomach because it's like I worked on just about every nameplate that's ever been out. And you knew you were talking to some guys that only knew that product. My service manager that I worked for had started there as a high school kid and had only ever worked on that product. That was it. Other than tractors on his farm at home and whatever
Yeah.
little bit dicking around basic work that he did. So when I came in with my diag experience and my process, I struggled trying to navigate the service side of the information system, but like in terms of fixing the cars, it was easy. He would talk to me like I was stupid because he had these guys that were like turning way more hours than me, but like they couldn't diagnose a volt drop on a ground, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or they couldn't diagnose a shorted fan clutch in a diesel truck. Like that's a really famous story of mine. I watched a harness and an ECM get thrown out of a truck because I had a shorted fan clutch. And he didn't even understand at that point when I went to him and said, this is what they did to fix it. This is why, blah, blah. It was like, it went right over his head. He had no idea what I was even talking about. It was old hat for me because let's be real. It's a Cummins engine in a truck. Cummins, when they were putting them in Dodges years ago, were having the same short happen on the same, because it's probably a Vallejo clutch. It's probably the same damn part. Right. But it was like, if he'd never been exposed to it, he didn't know. And when I was trying to explain to him what was happening, it was like, fishbowl. He didn't have any idea what I was talking about. It was the most trying. Well, I swore off dealerships after Nissan. I'll never go into one again. I'll sell my tools before I'll ever go back to a dealership, because it's just, I'm sure that's, and since I've left, they've turned over their whole service department except for one guy.
Wow.
And that speaks volumes about how poor the culture is there. So, I mean, I can honestly say that the product gets a bad rap for a couple of really glaring issues, but it deserves that at the same time. It's terrible.
Mm-hmm.
Did anybody ever show you, Eric, the IPDM output test that you could do with the door jam switch when you were there?
I'm not. Are you talking about where it cycles through,
Yeah.
like the wipers and everything?
Yeah.
No one at the shop showed me that. That's something I learned at Basic Electrical.
Yeah. That's one of the best tips I can give anybody. Learn that, because it's so, you don't even need the scan tool then to do, outputs. But what frustrated me from the Nissan side is you'd be looking at stuff and it's like stuff would go into a module and out a module, but you couldn't actually look at it with the scan tool. Yeah. Like I remember door locks and wiper status or window status drove me nuts, because it was, you knew the message were being bussed back and forth, but you couldn't see it as data. You could get in there with a scope and look, but you couldn't see it as data. It drove me crazy. It was so dumb.
The wildest thing that I ended up figuring out that my foreman and 3 other techs didn't, there was a rogue that you could open the rear hatch because it had automatic motors, but it would not close at all. And they're looking at the system, trying to figure out, like, it's commanded open. It's you can see the parts for that, but you can't, like, they didn't understand what was going on. And I said, okay, well, look at a different rogue and see what the value is for a fully opened. Can you chill out? She might need to go out.
Yeah.
You can see the value for the rear tailgate being fully opened. I'm like, okay, maybe the system's not realizing that the gate is fully opened or something.
Yeah.
And even going to a different car, you couldn't see that. The value looked exactly identical, so we didn't know why. And then I finally looked at physically the rear hatch, because it was just plastic. Those motor arms go into the rear plastic of that tailgate, not onto metal, and there would be a crack right where that mounting bolt is. And so that just tiny little crack shortened that value, so the car wouldn't allow the tailgate to go down because it never registered that it was fully opened. So it wouldn't close because the car doesn't know that it's fully opened. So it's an error. So when I saw, I'm like, look, there's a crack right there. I guarantee it needs a new tailgate. And it was still under warranty, and they got a new tailgate, installed it, worked perfectly. And then after that, every single time a customer came in with a tailgate that wouldn't close, that would open, I would look for that crack and just instantly be like, okay, well, it's out of warranty. You're just going to have to close it. Like, don't spend the thousands of dollars to replace the tailgate. It's cracked. Like, my thinking is it cracks because people physically push it down instead of hitting the button, because that motor has so much tension on that plastic that when you push it and it goes down, that can cause it to crack. So that's probably what the customer was doing anyways, but at least they know why it's not working.
Yeah.
I love being able to figure out a problem of, okay, this is exactly why it's happening, instead of just replacing the part and never knowing why. Just to figure out the actual cause and fix it. That's, to me, that would be my main, like, happiness. If I could diagnose a car, find out the cause, correct the issue, and replace the parts, instead of just replacing a part, it come back a year later with the same issue because you never actually fixed the main underlying cause.
So kind of not to hurry you along, but so after you left the dealer, you've kind of got yourself a new job. You kind of headed in a new direction. What are you doing now?
Right now, these scooters are in a lot of different countries and different states. I don't know all of them, but they're called Lime.
Okay.
And so I'm the lead mechanic at a repair facility for rentable scooters. Can you chill out?
If you want to take her out, we can take her out.
I'll take her out really quick, and then we'll come right back.
Yeah.
So be right back. Threw him and then came right back up to the door. So we'll
No
see if she's
worries.
actually good.
So it's Lime scooters.
Yeah.
Right on.
Well, these things, they're, I don't know, maybe 40 pounds. You can manipulate them in a way to put them on the stand to actually fix them, and they're not that hard to work on. Sometimes I still have issues with my back and my hand working on these things, but it's more manageable than being an auto mechanic where you're under a dashboard trying to get something, your back is on the door sill, and you're just having a hard time. So, a couple of weeks ago, there was someone who reached out to me that I used to work with. He was one of the main parts guys, but now he's the overall manager of a store
Okay.
up a little bit more north. And he messaged me saying, "Hey, we're looking for a great tech. We would give you 2 bays, this, that, and the other. I'd love to have you because I know how good you work." Like, well, I have an MRI coming up. My back's been hurting. Like, I need to figure out what's going on with that before I even make any type of decision. And I said to him, I'd rather be in parts still, regardless what my MRI says. And he's like, well, get your results back and then we'll talk some more. And when I said to him, so he said that, and then I said I would still rather work in parts. I didn't get anything back from him. I'm sure he doesn't have an open parts position.
Right.
I do love being in the automotive industry, but physically I can't do it. And
Mhm.
it sucks because even working on my new car, I had an Infiniti M56S that got rear-ended and totaled.
Yeah.
It's a sedan with a V8. It was a very nice car. And now I have an Xterra that has 193,000 miles manual. It's a great truck, and just working on it, I can only work on it like a half an hour at a time before I have to take a break. But I enjoy working on it. It's a fun truck to work on. That's when Nissan was the best, I think.
Yeah.
Back in those Frontiers, Pathfinders, Xterras, those were like the workhorses of Nissans. No one ever really had an issue except for the intermixing in the radiator. That would
Yep.
happen sometimes.
Yep.
So whenever someone comments on a video of mine saying, "Hey, how can you work on Nissans? They're such piles of crap." I'm like, well, there are a lot of bad Nissans out there, but any Nissan that I've had has been a good vehicle.
Mhm.
I've worked there long enough to know which ones are good, which ones are bad. And so I try to kind of tell those stories about, okay, this car worked for me great. This one didn't work so well. But would I want to be a mechanic at Nissan again? No. I wouldn't really want to be a mechanic in any sense of any car manufacturer. Now, let's say, so I did get my MRI results back, and I do have 2 bulging discs and a fissure somewhere. I haven't had the doctor call me to like actually tell me. I just logged in and saw the base notes of that. Now, if I have surgery on my back and I feel great, then maybe I could be a mechanic again. But I feel like there are other things that I could do that can give me that same type of fulfillment. Like I would love to fly a plane.
Mhm.
Now that's a different technical sense. You're not really working on the thing, but that's something that I would love to be able to do.
Right. And see, that's funny because I kind of think you already answered the question, but I'll ask it anyway because, like, Brandon and I, and it's popped up, and Chuck and everybody else, right, about mentorship and the young people in this industry and stuff like that. And you kind of said a very powerful thing where you said you wouldn't necessarily, if you could go back, you wouldn't go back and do it again,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because of and I want to say that it's never once have you said it's because of what you actually physically had to do that you didn't like the job, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
it's the culture of the job. Like, yes, it hurts you now, right? Because of your
Yep.
your back injury from the motorcycle accident. But I mean, if you didn't have the motorcycle accident, you would still be doing the job probably.
Of course.
But you're like so many of us, it's the culture of the way it is that is the grind. Like we all talk about, like, and I got wrist issues, I have elbow issues, I got, my back, my sciatic will give me a hard time if I'm not stretching and whatnot. But the thing that makes me want to quit it some days is the, like you said, the political nonsense, the BS of working in a dealership. And
Mm-hmm.
let's be real, everybody, like my detractors that are going to listen to this, and a big part of my audience is going to go, well, that's dealerships, dude. But we can talk to lots of other people that have worked in shops, that the if the culture is the same because of its money, 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 push, 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 high car count, big hours, all that kind of stuff, right? Which is pushing major for profit. We're not saying profit is a bad thing. Then it doesn't really matter, does it? That it's a dealership. You're still going to burn through your people.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think there's a fix for that, Eric, or is it like what's the industry got to do to make you, somebody like yourself, not look back on it and go, I wish I'd done something else?
I'd say knowing my friends that have even owned their own shops,
Mm-hmm.
so it's not just dealer talking, it kind of seems like there's the huge disconnect of the customers aren't really understanding what we're trying to tell them, and people online could give false information,
Yeah.
and they take that information over your own.
Yep.
Like you have a car that the microfilter has never been changed,
Mm-hmm.
and it's horrible, and it's causing fan noise because some leaves got through and it's making a noise. Well, they'll just say bang out the filter and don't replace it. And there are some benefits to replacing it. And it's some vehicles. Hey, chill out 1 second. Go outside. Go. So when the customers aren't believing what you're telling them, that is a very big detractor.
Yeah.
Or you have experience in something, but to them it doesn't make sense. And in our MPI system, we could take videos and show,
Yeah.
and customers wouldn't even look at them to actually see what's going on with their car. So they would just decline it and move on. And if you're working on a car and a customer is pissed off, most of the time you take the hit because it's not worth your time to try to convince that customer, and you just let them go. So if
Yeah.
it's they come in for an hour diag and it's $140, whatever. For me, working at a dealership, I was paid 27 an hour. So if I have to work on a car for 3 hours to get paid 1 hour, I'm not going to want to do it.
No, I won't. I flat
Or
out.
0 hours.
Yeah.
Because there's some times where you get a car, you look at it, you figure it out in, let's say, 10 minutes. And the customer makes a big issue about it. And you're just like, all right, take the car somewhere else if you don't want to believe my recommendation
Mm-hmm.
or this, that, and the other. Don't even pay me the diag, because for me it was simple, and it's going to be more of a headache and waste my time to try to get your car fixed and get paid for it, instead of just, let's say, there's the other flip side to where sometimes you take care of the customer and you know that you might make a new customer because
Mm-hmm.
you took care of them. Let's say they come in, their rear hatch doesn't open,
Yep.
or their trunk doesn't open, and you're like, oh, there's a switch. Flip the switch. And you educate them, and it's all hunky dory. They come back, they're good to go. But that's my choice. When
Mm-hmm.
it's not up to my choice, then to me, that's the worst part.
Yeah.
That's a main detractor, where I'm working on a car, customer comes in, they need a radio update because holy crap, Nissan had some bad radios and needed a crap ton of updates there for a while. This car was out of warranty. All it needed was an update. The service writer said, hey, just do the update because we know that's going to be easy. I'll get my hour diag. Well, then after I do the update the next day, oh, we're not going to charge the customer for diag or anything. I'll get you on the next one. And I'm like, what the heck, man? Like, the
Yeah.
customer signs when they come in for that. Like, what are you gaining from this by giving it to them for free, where I'm getting screwed on it?
And the thing is, that's always a gamble. And everybody goes like that old method of thinking is, oh, well, I helped them out. I helped the customer out. You know, I comped it, whatever you want to call it. And it's an investment on that customer coming back. I have been around long enough to know that that doesn't necessarily mean that they do. There's a lot of people that go out of there just smiling and they go, I got one over on them finally.
Yeah.
They've always gotten one over on me, and they don't necessarily, it's a poor investment. The thing is, if that method worked of giving to the customer that free repair, if it really worked enough of the time, whatever in your marketing budget or whatever you want to call it, public relations, there'd be enough money to pay you your $27. And that's the thing. Like, and here's the thing that blows my mind is like you're at $27 an hour and your door rate was 180, right?
Yeah.
Like that is absolute effing robbery. That is absolute effing robbery. And I'll say this: I was higher than that at a lower door rate. So your dealership, and you and I talked about this months ago when we started breaking down, because you talked about a wheel bearing quote that somebody, I think, gave your someone, a friend of yours, an ex or whatever, and you know, you were talking about it was the labor was this and the part was that, and you said, but I can buy a part for $70, and I kind of said, so whoa, wait a minute, there's a difference there because it's not the same part. But when you started to share with me exactly what they paid versus what they charged, I was with you on the fact that you like it's just your dealership that you left is obviously is like in damage control because they are way too greedy about what they're charging, trying to build. They're not taking care of their customers, obviously. And I mean, it goes back to what I said, man. You've got sometimes, I don't know what this sickness is, but it's like sometimes one dealer owner never seems to be happy just owning one dealer. They want to own like 3 or 4.
Yeah. The Tim Daly was the company that I worked for. They had like 7 or 8 dealerships in around the Salt Lake Valley, some in Colorado. Like this, the Daly Corporation has been up since the 60s. So of course they're going to have a bunch of different dealerships. They're not just all Nissans, they're different brands. And
it's a deal.
It was actually, did you see that video where the guy ran through the glass? That was a Tim Daly Mazda.
Wow. But wasn't he on a Subaru?
A Subaru, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Or was it? No, it was a Subaru, but I believe it was at the Mazda dealership.
You might have bought a used or something and disgruntled, right?
It's definitely used. And I made a video, and of course it didn't get many views because I, don't get many views as of late. But I made a video saying, well, with me working with who I've worked with, I know that you're not given the MPI.
Yeah.
So when I get a car that comes in, I give it the full workout, what it needs, what it doesn't need. This is leaking, this wheel bearing's bad, it needs tires. Let's say the tires are at 330 seconds. Well, by safety standards, that still passes.
Yeah.
So you're putting out a car that has bad tires where they're like, well, it doesn't fail safety, so just put it out. And then a customer can look at it and be like, yeah, this is fine. And then they have an issue with it. And then they blame the dealership when in part you as a customer, you have to do your own due diligence. It sucks that you have to take it to another mechanic, ask them to put it up in the air, this, that, and the other. When my girlfriend, her Kia Soul, the engine just went when I was driving it.
Of course.
Smoke just right out the tailpipe. I looked at it, diagnosed it, needed to get a new car. So we went to a Chevy dealership and she really wanted a Mazda. And I wasn't very sure about them. Apparently the new Mazdas are better than older ones. And while we're there at the dealership, like this is the first time where I've really been somewhere that I'm not in the industry anymore. They can do pretty much whatever. I'm not getting any discounts. And I said to them, hey, I want to put this car in the air because I want to look if there's anything underneath that's leaking or this, that, and the other. And like, well, it's almost 5 o'clock. All the guys are going. So we can do a WEO and you can bring it back and we'll put it in the air and this, that, and the other. But they were still pressuring, like, oh yeah, we want you to buy this now. So
Yeah.
of course, my girlfriend really loves the car. And when I had my Infinity, I bought it from a GMC dealership because, again, it was a rare car. My Nissan didn't have it, and I'm not going to pay for a transfer fee.
Right.
So I got a 3-year, 30,000-mile warranty for like $1,200. The car had 62,000 miles on it. Great deal for
Good
an
enough.
aftermarket warranty. And it ended up covering about $4,000 worth of stuff through the lifetime of it. So I made out.
Mm-hmm.
My girlfriend, she's like, I really want to have a warranty on this thing because it has 160,000 miles on it, I think. And the warranty was $3,000. So that made the $9,000 car, after all said and done with all the fees, 15,000. And I'm like, okay, if I know you're not supposed to judge you getting a car based on the monthly payment, but in this case, she wanted a newer car. I told her, we can get you an old car, like an old Subaru. I can fix it. You can get like a $4,000 car. It's going to be fine. But that's kind of what you have to balance. Do you want a newer car and pay more? Do you want an older car, pay less? And well, it was her decision to pay the extra to have that also added security of the warranty. But I didn't want to take the car back just to put it in the air to look at it. What I did is the day after we bought it, well, she bought it, in my garage, I jacked it up, undid the skid plate, looked under, said, okay, everything looks solid. It's not leaking or anything.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was a good deal. Nothing seems to be wrong with it, but it's just the simple fact that you're pressured to buy the car, same as you are pressured to buy the services when you're in getting things done. And I think the pressure is what really hurts people and makes them not want to come into really anywhere to get their car work done. And I know I've talked to guys who worked in 2008 when the financial crisis was. Nobody afforded fixing their cars. So instead of doing oil changes, their engines would get blown up. Like, it's just, the people are so hesitant to believe when it costs so much to get
Yeah.
their car fixed. Like, you're telling me it's really $400 to do this repair. And then they go online and then they're like, well, I can get this part for this amount of money and this backyard mechanic can do it for a third of the cost. But then the job doesn't get done correctly.
Right. Yeah. And that's been my whole thing. Like, I don't really care at the end of the day if the repair gets done, right? If you're going to have me check the car out, you're going to pay for my time to check the car out, and I'm going to tell you accurately what the car
Yeah.
needs or what it probably needs, depending on the time frame of what you want to allot to determine to go through the
Mm-hmm.
inspection and the diag, and that's it. I just want enough of those checks at the end of the day to justify my time spent there. It doesn't really matter to me because I always looked at it like this: if they go somewhere else and they get a subpar repair, I'll see them again.
Yeah.
And it's an educational point, right? Like, they've learned that this is why the value
Mm-hmm.
at the $150 store versus the $75 store or shop is different. I'm not trying to run them down because there's some really sharp guys that don't work in a shop. There really are.
Yeah.
But I got frustrated to no end with like all these check this, check that, check this, check that, no charge, no charge, no charge. There's a video I'll stitch probably tomorrow. A young lady, I don't know if you saw it. She took her Jeep in. Check engine light had been on, and then it went out. And they takes it back to the dealership. I don't know. She didn't say if it was under warranty or not, but anyway, she got charged $150. They went through it all. The light's not on, and they can't tell her why the light came on. Now, she doesn't come with she doesn't have a paper copy of her RO in her hand. She doesn't read anything to anybody saying it had this code, but the light went off. There's no context to any of this. It's just another video that says, I paid for something and I feel like I got ripped off. People that are listening or out there that need to understand is you are responsible to make yourself informed and educated about what it is you're operating and what you pay for. That's your responsibility as a consumer on anything, not just cars. You want to go buy a house, you want to go buy a television, a cell phone, do your research on what you're buying. If somebody can't convey to her, and I'm not saying it wasn't, there probably might have been a communication breakdown, because a lot of us service writers, if we've got to know them, they don't always are really good at saying, hey, you had a P0 whatever code and this is what it means and it's not happening right now. And if I had to guess, she probably has an evap fault.
Yeah.
It probably needs an ESIM, but they probably went back and tested the ESIM, and at the time it doesn't work. And everybody that works with Chrysler knows, stick an ESIM and it's going to fix the car. Cool. But she didn't come with any of that, right? So now she's just another ranting, I'll say it, lunatic online, talking about they didn't get their value, or they got ripped off, whatever. I'm so tired of that narrative, because the people at this point, I think we're going to where we're starting to bring the technician proficiency up, and we're starting to get better communication in a lot of our facilities. And yet they're still toting this narrative that I got ripped off.
Mm-hmm.
Every time somebody doesn't understand something, it doesn't mean that they got ripped off. You just didn't either do the work to understand what was being said and what you're paying for, or you can't, it was explained to you, but it's still gobbledygook in your head, and you just go on and get in front of a platform and start spouting words off, and none of it was really factual. This is my problem in misinformation. And, we touched on it before we got on. We're seeing a lot of that, Eric, lately from some content creators, and it's kind of, how do you feel about it? Like, you've been always really good with, like, if you're showing something, it wasn't misinformation, and you didn't do a whole lot of, I'll call it DIY type,
Yeah.
videos. And I respect the guys that don't, because I don't think that that's what our best course of action is.
Mm-hmm.
But when you see somebody putting out misinformation, does it make you want to pull your hair out?
Yes and no. I know personally when I've done videos, there's been times where I've done a diag and someone comments saying, "Hey, I
Mm-hmm.
think you're wrong here. Look at this." And I'd be like, "Okay, I'm going to go into the shop tomorrow. I'll do this test." And then it turns out that that person was right and
Yeah.
I was kind of wrong in my video about my diag. But there's a difference between being wrong and correcting it and learning versus just putting something out there that doesn't necessarily make sense. And I've seen some videos a couple ways of, like, let's say Dave's Auto,
Mm-hmm.
about the whole don't let a car idle. Now, for me, in my state, it doesn't really get super cold. Whenever I've had again, I can't really speak for the diesel side because I've only ever owned gas or cars.
Mm-hmm.
I let them warm up for about a minute or so, and then I start driving light and warm up the car because I don't think there's a real benefit to letting a car sit for 10 minutes. However, when there are cars that are up in the north, very cold temperatures, like I bought my Xterra from Wyoming and it had a plug in it to have a block heater.
Yep.
Now, in Utah, yeah, we get winter, snow, maybe in the negative sometimes, but it's not that in my wheelhouse. So with Dave's Auto, he's also in Utah. He's northern Salt Lake.
Yep.
So he's in that same realm that I am of, if you have a diesel, to either let it warm up or not. Well, in our climate, again, I don't know if he's a Utah native, been here all of his life, or if he's been in super cold climates. For me, it makes sense that you don't necessarily need to let it warm up for 10 minutes and then go. Now, the additives, I'm kind of a cynic in that
Yeah.
if you're trying to sell a product and you're saying, don't do this thing or don't do that thing, well, why are you selling a product when there's already products out there for that?
Yeah.
Now, I've used BG products on my car, whether it's a fuel additive or an oil additive. Now, I had a company that reached out to me, or well, I made a video years ago saying, "Hey, I want to test some oil. Does a company want to send me some oil?" And the company was called Silogram Oil. They're based out of New York, I believe. Due to my whole accident, it took way too long to get the oil change done because I didn't drive the car. and I lost the footage. I don't know what happened to it. It was so long ago that whatever. I never actually got to make the footage. And on my car, I would always do the EPR
Mm-hmm.
before the oil change and then put the MOA in afterwards because
Yeah.
they say that it's meant for the acidity, whatever. It makes your car last longer. And I got the BG rep sent out my oil sample and I got the results for Mobile One oil. And it said that I had higher metallic content. I forgot what it was. I need to find the email. But when I finally got around to doing the second oil change with the Silogram oil product, I never got that result from the BG guy. I sent
Mm-hmm.
out the sample, never got the result back, so I don't know the difference.
Right.
Now, you actually have to test to see if there's any benefit or detractor for using a product. And I know, coming back to the Dave's Auto thing, like, there are some places that you definitely need to warm up the truck,
Yep.
let it get to operating temp before you go because it's just not going to run.
Mm-hmm.
The air temperature, it's way too dense. The computer is going to have a hard time because yes, you have high idle, like even my '07, you start it up and it has a high idle to get the cat temps up so that everything can start. More so, high idle is a thing that needs to be done for emissions. That's really what I believe that
Yeah.
the high idled is, so that you can get those cats up to temp. Now, diesel, I'm not too familiar with that. If it's the same design where you need to warm it up and have a high idle for those exhaust systems. But I also know that the amount of times, now you worked at Nissan working on those diesels,
Mm-hmm.
the amount of carbon buildup on those things is
Yeah.
just crazy. Those, was it the, not the EGR coolers
Yeah.
would get caked up so bad. And I don't know if it's because those vehicles were idling a lot or not. I don't know the root cause, but I saw those EGR coolers were replaced almost every single day on different vehicles. And you can say, well, it's because you did or did not warm up your vehicle, but I think the main thing is that it just has the EGR. Like, you're putting that
Yeah.
soot back into the motor. You're it's like essentially puking and then
Yeah.
ingesting it again. Like,
100%. All that blow by gas is going right through back into the engine, right? So
mhm,
EGR on a diesel is a bad idea no matter what. Whatever lowering of not of combustion temperatures that they've been able to achieve from that has been as the expense of shortened engine life with a
mhm,
100% plus cylinder dilution. The whole idle thing with the diesel is that, like, yeah, he's in Utah, I'm in Canada, where I can show you that, like, most people that buy a diesel truck and use the diesel truck, so I'm talking like they're on a job site or something like that, that thing is started up at 7 in the morning and they don't shut it off except to put fuel in it.
mhm,
Or if they're going to go into the coffee shop or the restaurant for an hour lunch, it shuts off. But otherwise, like, it may stay at a job site and idle all day long. When I ran our fleet of at a shop I worked at years ago with a bunch of Fords for tire service, they didn't buy diesels if they could help it because they would soot up all the time.
mhm.
That thing would sit there and idle all day long while it ran the compressor to service the tires, the whole thing. I'm talking tractor trailer tires. So he's not wrong that idling does cause more soot loading into the DPF and all that kind of stuff. Is it going to, like, change the fact that, like, those trucks are going to need DPF sensors and all that? No, it won't, because it's just by the nature. And nothing he's ever created is ever going to be able to go into the fuel system
No,
and prevent that from happening.
it's not going to change the fundamental issue that it's the government's
Yeah.
control over the vehicles. Now, I guarantee that, like, Nissan switching over to CVTs, it's because they wanted to make a more fuel efficient vehicle. Well, what was their main reason for making it more fuel efficient? Was it because customers wanted that more fuel efficient car, or was it because the government put the mandate that, what is it actually called, where the
Fixed credits.
totality of the manufacturer has to be under a certain amount of emissions?
cafe credits. That's what
Yeah.
they call
That if you have 5 different cars that are fully electric, then you can have your diesel or your Frontier that doesn't get great gas mileage. So these companies are kind of being pigeonholed into making a product that is within the range that the government is allowing you to operate in. And so that's making vehicles worse. And sometimes it's a bad change internally without it being um, a government related thing. Like the reason what I was told why the 5.6s would have the piston issue is because they changed the metallic content in the piston itself. It's a weaker material. And on the door sill or the oil cap, wherever, it doesn't say mandatory premium fuel.
Yeah.
So if you have a weaker piston sleeve and you're using subpar fuel, you're going to get the scoring.
Mm-hmm.
The piston slap, whatever you want to call it, when we would have to send in that information to Nissan, you take a bore scope, you see the scratches, and you're like, okay, needs a short block.
Yeah.
And if it's bad enough metallic stuff in there, then you get a whole long block. But that, in that sense, it's Nissan making a change to try to save some money, and it just backfired on them. So then
Yeah.
the new short blocks that come out are better reinforced, but it still doesn't show that there's not a sticker you put in there saying that this direct injection motor is supposed to take premium fuel.
Yeah.
And if you're using the incorrect fuel, you're going to have a bad time. Now, diesel, whether it's off road diesel or normal diesel, it's just diesel. You don't have, as far as I know, different levels of octane for a diesel. So that's not really going to be an issue for them, as far as I can tell. But it's just the simple fact that you're putting on EGR or DPF on all that into diesel, and it's restricting it, and it's not a good time for anybody who does have a diesel. Like there's benefits to having a diesel, of course, that you kind of have to deal with it for today's day and age.
Yeah.
My
Dave
buddy,
Dave did a video months ago where he showed he had a truck in the shop, and it was a truck by the American Air Force that ordered it. And it was a factory 6-liter ordered by, it would have been through a fleet sale, obviously
I
through
remember that video.
Yeah, and it's a 6-liter without a factory EGR on it.
Mm-hmm.
So the whole idea for this nonsense for me is the fact that it's like, why do they sell that? Because when they sell that truck, that if it's equipped with an EGR and they know they're going to sell it to a government fleet, that it's going to idle all day long. It's never going to shut off. That's just what they do. If you ever fly out of an airport, every truck that you see down around on the tarmac next to the planes, they're all running all the time. Never shut off, ever. So the fact that they can sell that truck to those people and go, hey, we're going to let you have a different set of industry, regs, that to me is completely flipped. It should be the other way, that the consumer should be able to buy that with the less problematic systems on it.
Yeah.
And the government should be getting the ones that have the problematic systems, because they're the ones that, let's be real, they're going to have the money to fix it. Joe Consumer doesn't. So when we get into all these deleted, tuned, EGR delete trucks out there, and everybody's going after these people, it's really quite stupid, in my opinion. Because the reality is diesel, anything, as long as it's ever been built, has been designed to idle all day long. Tractors have been designed to idle all day, right? Trucking, like when they're not being driven down the road, everybody that's ever owned a rig doesn't go shut it off. Now, the fleet companies have all got them on timers, and they don't allow them because they're just chasing their same fuel standards that everybody else is forced to be. So his whole thing with don't idle, the way everybody went after him for that was just like, I still go back to the transmission seal, and I still go back to the mass airflow on the Dodge Charger. Those two things enough. Like, okay, you need to step away from the camera a little bit more. You're digging himself a hole. But I mean, it's not, I never wanted to dogpile the guy. I just, I see these things happening on social media that you and I are, pretty big on. And I just shake my head because all of us are missing the bigger point here, which is like, we immediately get called jealous. But the reality is like, I'm not jealous of somebody that's built themselves a career and a reputation and all that,
Mhm.
because good on them. That's what we want. I hate it when somebody comes one sided to a conversation with no backup, with no, like, if that guy was saying I'm supposed to have speedo motor pistons in my engine, and he never has a piece of paperwork to explain why, and then
Mhm.
after the fact that just the video goes away, like there was something going on there. And I'm not trying to say that he either, got scared and pulled it or whatever, but
Yeah,
too many people are trying to dogpile on people anymore online. And I don't think it's a good look for all of us. So that's kind of where I wanted to end off. I didn't want to, appreciate you being on here, and
of
I
course.
just, I'm glad that we got to know one another, because, like I said, I enjoyed your content, and then you kind of went away, and I didn't know what happened. And when I heard it was a motorcycle accident and a back injury, my heart went out to you, because I mean,
Yeah,
it's, you seem like you were one of those good techs that, unfortunately, when we lost you to the industry, I was like, shit, there goes another one, right? And
yeah,
then I'm always wanting to know the story why that happens. You just get burnt out and you want to go. I don't. It sucks that you're in pain the way you are, but I mean, I appreciate what you do for us
of course.
nonetheless. And I mean, I'm hoping one day that I can see you back in the industry,
Yeah, me
because
too. At some point, maybe.
we need guys like you. So, but any closing remarks you want to make? Suggestions, advice to the young people?
My closing remark is it's kind of a TikTok issue, but I guess if it goes away, it's not much of an issue anymore.
Something too.
There's so many videos about people reviewing products
Mm-hmm.
that they make a bad video. They're like, oh, you aren't doing this correctly. Use this tool instead, or whatever. Like, it aggravates me when it's like, that's not even how you do that. Like,
Yeah.
how about you use the product? And every time I make a video where a company sends me something, you're actually going to see me use it,
Mm-hmm.
set it up. I'm not just making a video like, oh, they're on sale, go buy them while they last. Like, I think that is kind of a detriment to the people on the platform that actually want to know if a product is good or bad, because no one's actually testing these things to
Yeah.
find out if they're actually worth buying. And then you buy it and you're like, oh, this is a pile of crap.
Mm-hmm.
So there's the latest one that I had was a King Bullen product
Okay.
that it was a little dongle that you plug in to read codes. And King Bullen products for me in the past have been good. I've had their actual K7. It's a wireless, and then
Mm-hmm.
another one that's only for Nissans that you have to plug in. And I told them that, hey, there's this issue with this product because I'm actually using it. Now, I've seen other people make videos that saying, oh, it's a great product. It's this, that, and like you can do whatever you want with it. It's like, no, well, that's not true. Actually sit down and use the product. And it can be kind of like with Dave's video about, or any video that anybody's made about diagnosing a car. If they get surprised that they're getting shit for making a video with incorrect information,
Mm-hmm.
I don't, you shouldn't be surprised that people are upset when you make a bad video of a product or a diag that just is incorrect. So you as a viewer, when you're watching it, if you are questioning something, do some research yourself.
Yep.
If something's not adding up, even outside of automotive, outside of TikTok, do the research, not just going on Google and looking for the AI overview. Actually, maybe even talk to someone, look for articles or whatever. Just do your due diligence because that has really gone away.
Yeah.
And people just see an article, read the headline, that's all they want to read.
Yep.
They don't go in to see the nuance of what's actually happening. And so people are so polarized, is this good? Is this bad? But they're not actually taking into account what they might have in their situation.
Mm-hmm.
And that's pretty much what I'll say. Just do your due diligence, protect yourself, and if you want to save some money, YouTube is a great place to go. You can see some really good videos about replacing things, and if you have the tools, you can replace it yourself. And that's what my whole thing of why I started TikTok is, because I wanted to show people this is how I fix something, and you can use this to help fix it yourself.
Right.
And of course, I can't really do that anymore except when I'm working on my own car. But that's my whole mantra. I want to be able to show people how they can fix something themselves and not get screwed over, and so that they are educated a little bit better.
Yeah. I want to use the platform to be able to empower people, and I want some of the hate to go away. Like I said, I'm speaking back to that video of that lady that just wants to, young blonde girl be upset because she doesn't understand what the work order was in front of her and what it said and what they did. And that's,
Yeah.
I hate that narrative is still happening, but I want to say confidently that it's not happening as much and we're doing better. And, but the reality is we're still not communicating effectively
Mm-hmm.
what we need to be so the customer understands what that $140 an hour charge actually means. What is it? What did you get? And I know sometimes it seems like no value, and we're never going to get it perfect because everybody sometimes, when we're speaking in different languages, you're not going to see the value. You're just going to begrudgingly accept that it's like it's over my head and it sucks and it's, modern tech is terrible and blah, blah, blah. That's all reality. It's not going away. But we all have to try and do better to put out information that is actually valuable and accurate, and it empowers people to make better decisions. I don't necessarily want to teach people to avoid paying a mechanic because I think it's counterintuitive to my brothers and sisters. But at the same time, I want them to understand exactly why it costs what it costs for what we do for them. Because I think that becomes less hate on the platforms when they get on there and go, "You're just ripping me off." They're not. Nobody's going to work. You didn't go to work one day, I don't think, and ever decide you're going to rip people off. And I know I never went to work one day and said, "I'm here to rip as many people off as possible." Yep. Your story and my story have shown that more times than not, we're the one getting ripped off.
Yeah.
And that's all it is just sharing with people the reality that you think you're getting ripped off. Most of the time, that technician is the one that's being screwed here. So let's just, accept that we're all getting screwed together, or, understand where it comes down, and it's not malice. So
yeah.
I want to thank you for coming on. It's a beautiful Sunday night. So anything I can ever do to help you, man, you reach out to me, and I'm hoping that TikTok stays around so that we get to have more of your content, because I genuinely enjoy it. And if that is the case, even if it goes away, let people know where you're going to be, if you're going to be somewhere. And I'd love to have you back on again.
I've definitely, it's the same name across all the platforms, Drachnophobia. I've been trying to post more on Instagram. I do have a Twitter, but that's more shit posting. I just see things that are stupid and just reply whatever.
Yeah.
Sometimes I post YouTube shorts, and I am trying to post more long form content on YouTube as well. So even if TikTok goes away, you can still find me in those places, just same exact username.
Awesome. I love it. We appreciate you, and we'll hope to see you again. So everybody, as always, I love you all. Thanks for listening. Stay tuned. We got a lot of good fun stuff coming up. So